We do.
Yep.
Excellent.
Creative, basic, 2 images.
Oops, I got to switch again. 1 sec.
All right.
Light curves.
So we're starting with creative. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, basic level.
All right. Thank you. Let's jump right into it. I like that the contrast of color that you have chosen here is different from what one would usually go for. And I like that it's a difference, of course, the contrast between a red hue and a blue hue, but also a contrast in saturation. So you have the red that's very vibrant and the green that is much more subdued. And I think that adds to the contrast you want to create. I like the composition you have. It is very dynamic, but it is very much weighted by the 2 spheres that you have at the top and on the bottom. So it does feel like you have this relationship between the 2 elements. You have symmetry, but it's not all symmetrical. So it does retain interest and it has a lot of movement, which I also like. I would also want to comment on the shadow effect that you have, where you give some 3-dimensionality to this abstract shape by having these swirls going left and right recede in and out of the shadow. So I think that adds a lot of volume to the image. Thank you. Next.
Just say next when you're ready for the next one.
Okay.
Tropical reflections.
Mm-hmm. Very impressionistic. I think we're going for an aquarelle kind of look where all of the dots of color are bleeding as if ink or watercolor bleeding into the page. And so you added the texture of a watercolor paper that usually has this very rough texture in the background. You can really see it on the right-hand side, for example. I like all the colors that you have, lots of vibrancy and kind of freshness to it. Unfortunately, it's kind of difficult to make out what the overall kind of scene is. You can distinguish a few of the elements, the palm tree in the background, the mannequin and the dress in the front, but the other shapes like tree trunks, maybe a house in the back, are a little bit too haphazardly placed. There isn't really a clear relationship between them, and so the eye gets confused and kind of the colors become aggressive in that sense, where there's a little bit too much to look at. You have kind of a contrast that's interesting between pencil line and the watercolor. So some of the things are just outlined as if someone was just scribbling with a pencil, the legs of the mannequin and some of the tree trunk and that house in the back. I think that's an interesting thing to play with if it were a little bit more intentional in the message and composition of your piece. Thank you. Next.
Creating, intermediate, 3 images. Space launch.
Mm-hmm. I do like the intentionality of the composition where you made this specifically with that title in mind, or perhaps vice versa, you made this and then the title came to mind. So you are linking ideas together, and I like that. There's simplicity in your color palette. It's very sober, but at the same time with a lot of kind of elegance in this beautiful magenta and red that you have. I really love that slate gray as a background. It's not fully black, so that adds a lot of interest to it. I wonder, there is a very sharp black line on the right-hand side. It is quite distracting because it adds a very strong edge element. And so my eye is actually distracted from the big flower and it keeps going back to this, what feels like an anomaly or in an otherwise very intentional composition. I love the fact that the flower is so complex. It has a lot of shapes in it, but it also has a lot of hues. You have a little bit more pink and a little bit more red. So you have interest there in the shadows as well. I do worry if you're not blowing up on the highlights a little bit. I would have liked it either to really, really go for it. I mean, you are trying to create this kind of explosion or shooting star effect, perhaps. Or to lighten it down, to soften it down, or to bring down the exposure to bring more control of the lighting, more elegance to it. The trail is an interesting thought, and it's nice that you have it so diagonally, and it's well put inside of the image, but it lacks the complexity that the flower has. And so I wonder if adding a different hue of paint, especially in the shadow under the flower perhaps, or in the tail to make it a little bit more yellow or something like this, would add more interest to your composition. Thank you. Next.
Oops.
Hot rod.
One.
Lunar neighbors.
I find myself really enjoying the calmness of this piece. It almost feels like a clock composition to me, like a clock face where you have a central element and things dispose around it, and you kind of walk yourself into this timeline around the moon, which is the center element. So I think as a concept, this really works rather well. I really enjoy the concept of it too, of linking the moon, which is the one thing that illuminates the sky, but also all of the houses, porch lights, which is what you're trying to showcase here. I think the concept is really, really strong. What I would have liked to be worked on, there's a big patch of darkness on the lower left where there are no lights or almost no lights. I would have liked to fill it in to further emphasize this kind of going round and round and round the clock face, round and round the moon cycle. You know, there's all of this idea of time and cyclical effects here. It also feels very kind. I mean, porch lights are very warm and inviting, and they have a sense of family and home. So I would have liked just to fill in some of those lights. They're a little bit too dark in some spaces, but the concept is very nice. Next.
Hot rod.
Mm-hmm. I really enjoy the colors here, but I actually really, really, really like what you've done with this, you know, I'm not even sure what to call it, this repetition concept. You can clearly see the car still, so you can make out the shape of the main element, but it looks like it is emanating heat or is on fire or is radiating something. There's a vibration because of the very strong repetition of those lines. So it feels like this is a noisy image in a way, but not in the sense that there is, you know, grain noise, but in the sense that you can either feel it or you can hear it almost. The colors are really great, I think, because they are so well complementary to each other, and the gray kind of at the bottom makes a nice saturation contrast to the very vibrant yellow and blue. I think it grounds the picture quite nicely. In terms of abstraction, I think it works. There are enough focal elements, but at the same time, it's very interesting to look at. Like, I feel like there's texture in this just by raking my eyes along this pattern that you have going towards the top. So I do think this is a successful creative image. Thank you. Next.
Creative advanced, 5 images. Hazardous crossing. A bicycle vendor crosses a busy street during the early morning rush, Hanoi.
Mm-hmm. I see that there's a lot of motion blur here that's at play. You're telling us there's a motorcycle, and I understand that the contrast here is between the very fast movement of what is kind of still recognizable as motorcycle, this kind of very new, very modern thing, as contrasted to the slower, frozen in time, frozen in space, bicycle vendor. Unfortunately, I feel like there isn't enough intentionality in the composition here to really bring your point across. The things that are motion blurred are too smeared, and they're overlapping too much, especially that really bright car in the background is really detracting from that nice tension that you have between the bicycle vendor and the motorcyclist. It's also quite dark, and the colors are very, very muddy. So it's not a particularly pleasant one to look at. I understand what you're going for in terms of the motion blur contrast, but I feel, and I know street photography is difficult, but even though the concept is good, the execution is lacking. Thank you. Next.
Devil woman.
Mm-hmm. Fun and interesting composite, but it has a lot of power too. You are completely engulfing the image with this gigantic hair that is everywhere, and it adds a lot of texture, right? A lot of tactile kind of feel to the image. I like that you've used the black and white because that makes the features come out really, really strongly. And I always like when there's contrast in detail or texture and detail shape. So you have a lot of small details in the hair and you have a lot of flat areas in the skin. That always works pretty well. And here I think you knew how to use it. There is a lot of power because we are also looking up at this face, and so they look like they're towering over us, but at the same time looking away from us, so not even interested in where we are. So that adds a lot of power as well. And of course, it's a very strong feature of the composite nose, or perhaps makeup or something like this. It might be composite, as I see. Perhaps there is some blending here in the front. I would have made the blending just a little bit better. It does feel like you have different levels of blur there, trying to make the whole thing work. I like the concept. I think it's interesting. In terms of what I would change, I think it could benefit from a bit more contrast, actually, because you have really sharp, beautiful features on the eyes, and you have some interesting shadows going underneath the nose, for example. And then you have this aura of shadow around her face, right? Goes around her face, created by the hair. I think you can really emphasize that and make that face kind of either recede or come at you from that mass of hair. So I think trying to play maybe a little bit with dodging and burning, maybe a little bit more with the contrast curves, make it even stronger. Just really go for it because the message is so strong. Thank you. Next.
Do you see what I see?
Mm-hmm. This is going towards very, very full abstraction. And so at this point, I can no longer distinguish what was the original subject that was made into this pattern. It's not symmetrical, even though it feels like it has a rhythm to it. There is a direction of flow. This isn't pure symmetry, and therefore it does have this energy of going from left to right, up to down. I like the addition of these little vertical kind of streaky points of lights that cross the waves. I think it adds this kind of rhythmic energy to it. They feel like notes on a scale almost. And so there is a sense of musicality. This kind of interesting blotch on the left-hand side, the purple blotch, what to me, it looks like it's a reflection of a person's profile and like a big hood, perhaps, but I have to look at it a lot to divine that, and I'm not even sure that that's what that is. I feel like this was, if it were maybe a little bit more parsable, such that you could immediately feel like there's a person inside of these waves, that could be a little bit more, add some interest, add this element as very intentional within the composition. And finally, this is a completely personal preference, so take it or leave it. I'm not a fan of this kind of olive color for this. It feels a little bit too morose for this kind of very lively composition, like a river flowing or a torrent, you know, and with a lot of light pinpoints. Perhaps playing with the color, since it is such an abstract composition, to try to create different moods with it. Thank you. Next.
It's a jungle out there, after dark in a Sebastopol backyard as captured by an IR trail camera.
That is a lot of wildlife. I'm not sure if they're all there at once, if they might have been composited in for many different times at which the camera was clicked. Perhaps, so I see, for example, the skunk on the left-hand side has a halo around it. It might have been cut out from something else. So this what leads me to believe that it's maybe composite, but I'm completely unsure. I mean, I would be very surprised if all of them are at the same time like this. So I like the idea if it is, because it kind of shows you a snapshot of the entire night, of an entire time period. As opposed to just one animal, and I think that does add interest. Unfortunately, infrared cameras sometimes lack contrast in certain conditions, while they're really good contrast in others. The glowing eyes, I actually think that's pretty cool because it adds some charm to it at the same time as giving us very strong focal points. Thank you. Next.
Warp speed.
Mm-hmm. I like this. This is I think this is actually a good creative image, because we very seldom focus on small kind of textural details like this, very small kind of everyday almost objects. And to give it such importance is always interesting in such a very clean and refined way. So on that alone, I think kudos on the aesthetics of this image. Beautiful lines, very beautiful reflections. You chose the colors really well. And I really enjoy the composition, the placement in the image. What I think through your title is the fact that because of the strength of the reflections on the hood underneath the ornament, it does look like it is floating in midair. We have this illusion that it is in the sky. And so this object, this silver ornament is actually a spaceship floating in the sky. So if we blur our eyes a little bit, I could absolutely see this as a spaceship. And I really, really like that. If you wanted to emphasize this even further, because I think your photo is already kind of there, you have one diagonal line going from like the top shoulder to the top of the image. You have one line that is all the way at the back on the left-hand side, this kind of blue to white line that trails along the tail, continues the tail, and then one at the very bottom of the ornament going downwards into the right-hand corner of the image. Those lines kind of indicate to me that there is an irregularity in the sky that shouldn't be there. And to me, it breaks the illusion that this is the sky itself, that I kind of feel like this is a hood because of all of these angles. So you could blend those out or clone those out and completely give us the illusion that this is an actual spaceship. Those would be the only things I would change. Thank you. Next.
Creative Masters, 9 images. An illustrated man.
Nice. The colors vibrancy is insane here, but I'm not even quite sure how you achieve that, perhaps an overlay with a different texture. I like that very much. I like that the tattoos or I assume these are tattoos on this person's skin, are really emphasized by this glow of color. I like that all of the hair is just completely individualized by your color treatment. I think that's really cool. It almost looks like it's moving and like shimmering in my eyes as I look at the screen and I look away and I look at all the details. I'm not sure of the pose here. It does look a little bit distorted perspectively. I mean, it feels like his head especially is kind of flattened. There seems to be some distortion. I'm not sure what that's due to. I think this kind of treatment would be really interesting if the pose felt more intentional or more posed or more, how to say, a little bit less, like it's a strange perspective a little bit. So I would be really interested to see this kind of treatment on maybe same person or some different people that you would photograph kind of more head on, or focus a little bit more on the tattoos themselves, because right now they're kind of difficult to parse. I have no idea what the tattoo is of right now. Next.
Remember when we could fly?
I really enjoy this. It's a very, very intensive composite. I feel there's a lot of elements, the kids, but also all of these kind of very colorful bubbles, both what they're hanging onto and as the background. There's a lot of work. I don't know if you painted them yourself or if they are distorted composites of something else. They have this kind of fractal feeling to them. So perhaps these are your own distortions of something different, or a mural or something like this. I really like the composition. I think all the colors work together. The children themselves have a little bit less, popping colors. They're less fluorescent, and so it grounds them a little bit more, makes them feel more real and more voluminous because of these more like maroons and browns and earthy tones. So they contrast well with the kind of psychedelic colors around them. It's not too much. At the same time, they do echo some elements. For example, the girl on the right has that little thin color of green around her neck. Like, they paint themselves in very well, and the fact that you've actually painted over some of their clothes elements also blends them into this composition. Everything feels intentional. Nothing feels cut off or anything like this. It's really, really happy. I like the highlights on top of their heads. It looks like there's a lot of light even though you've excluded any sort of realistic background from it. They all seem very happy. I can make out all of their faces, so that's important to me as well. And overall, I think this is just a lovely, lovely idea of this like playfulness and joy of childhood that they're doing, they're experimenting and experiencing here. So really good job. And I really like the way that you're looking at this and presenting this. Thank you. Next.
Dia de los Muertos.
Mm-hmm. Very heavy composition, and you've included some heavy in the kind of psychological sense, right? You've included some graphical elements as well with the times and the dates in this kind of very pared down font. And to me, this almost does feel like a memento mori, or a sort of, this does feel to me tragic in some way. I'm not sure if this is meant this way, but that's how I'm interpreting it. It's very, the fact that in front of the face, you have a realistic face with the eyes and those beautiful colors behind them, with the parts of this flowers and things like this. But at the same time, you have this very straight, flat mouth that is either from a skeleton or something like this. It's very, it's kind of unsettling, right? With the nostrils being so dark and focusing. So in terms of composition here, I actually quite like what you're doing with like this half kind of festive flower thing in the back, but also with this kind of heavier bottom element. Unfortunately, the composition of the poster itself does not work for me. You're cutting off the head at the top, while your background elements are still protruding from it. The text, I would center it. It's not exactly centered on either the face or the frame itself. So I would move that and perhaps put the Dia de los Muertos above and the October 31st, November 2nd at the bottom. Switch them out. Thank you. Next.
Green Haven.
Mm-hmm. In case you can hear that, I apologize. I'm still at work. The liquid nitrogen is refilling the tank automatically, so it's hissing a little bit. Okay. This is very enjoyable to me because it has the element of, this is, first of all, a beautiful picture of nature. It's very green, it's very lush, it's luxuriant. It's also kind of has this fairy tale feeling, like kind of a Ghibli movie feel a little bit. You feel pulled into that space because it kind of goes up into the picture. So there's an upward movement, especially with trees that are arching above you. So that feels really fresh and cool and nice and inviting. But at the same time, the fact that you've symmetrized the picture is very interesting because it adds this element of, maybe I shouldn't go there, of a little element of unsettling, a little bit of, is this a dream? Is this real? Am I going to be captured by some fae? You know, like it's a little bit not right. There's never such perfect symmetry in landscape, and therefore it feels like something else has made this happen, that this was intentional and you're about to walk into something that is a different dimension or a different world or something like this. At the same time, you've created with the symmetry some sort of kind of a frog face in the center, which further adds this element of otherworldliness, because you can see this, like the eyes and the nose, and like, is this thing gonna wake up and talk to you? And so it has this element of magic that I personally would really want to step in, but that's person to person. So I really, really like this. I think you were smart in choosing what to symmetrize and where to place that symmetry line, especially with the arching trees. So that is well seen, and I enjoy this very much. Thank you. Next.
Sailing.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting, because I don't know how this was created, and I'm always interested in this sorts of composition. Even without your title, I can actually parse the boats, the ships that you have in the frame here. You have and we have a lot of these swirling blues that is actually kind of interesting because you have a lot of whirlpool patterns around the image, dancing around the image. But I haven't seen a lot of just regular, ocean water do that. So I'm intrigued by these cyclical kinds of shapes that you have. I like the breakdown of the boats. It's almost kind of cubist. It's almost Mondrian in the way that you have like bits and pieces, like a puzzle of the ship that you're assembling through these square rectangular shapes. I'm not sure that the pincushion distortion is particularly enhancing the shot. I think this would be more interesting if it was just a grid of puzzle pieces where you could have maybe reshuffled some of these. You could have taken a rectangle with a mast and put it in the bottom, put a rectangle that has some of the, I don't know, some of the people under that tent on the boat, put it on the top, and let the viewer reassemble those pieces, maybe just a few, not necessarily all of them. I think that would have been interesting as well. The one thing that I would notice is that you have this kind of reflection, green reflection, kind of in the middle lower right, that's fighting against all of the blue around it, and it's fighting against my way to parse the ships. I keep coming back to it because it's so green versus the rest of the blue. So I perhaps would either remove that, or if you wanted to make it part of your composition, I would actually take one of the bars that you have, clone it, and delineate that as its own area to say that some of those squares are actually green as opposed to blue, and add that contrast. Thank you. Next.
Color vision.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is very cool. I like that very much. To me, what this invokes immediately is a bismuth crystal, but that's also because I'm a material scientist and a metallurgist. So for me, this looks like a very colorful version of a micrograph, or something you would see under the microscope of some sort of geological crystal of some sort, or pseudocrystal, I suppose. So I really like these kinds of symmetry, but not quite, because I always think that pure symmetry is difficult to render very interesting. So you have to add elements that break it, not necessarily all the time, but it does help to add a certain dynamism to your image. And I think this achieves that. You have a rhythm that it feels like it's going from left to right, from bottom to top. There is kind of like this rhythm to it, or you can feel like it's going along the other diagonal, but there is a diagonal movement here. The colors, the fact you have bright colors in the center and receding towards the edges gives a focus, this volume, so that the front of the image comes at you. And so it's as if you took kind of a magnifying glass and you were really zooming into this like particular crystallite structure or something like this. The colors are very vibrant and really, really fun. I'm really enjoying looking at this as a texture piece, and I think this this would look great in a lot of contexts. Thank you. Next.
Feathered.
Mm-hmm. I really like the colors. They're actually very kind of, they remind me of the bird of paradise flower. And I think this kind of, maybe the shape also reminds me of this, because you have this kind of diagonal movement, and then you have these orange kind of either flowers or leaves kind of going to the right horizontally. But that could be because of the colors, could be because of the shapes, it could be because of the fact that everything is so feathered, and those flowers are also kind of fuzzy. Either way, it does invoke a sense of this kind of very tropical otherness, this kind of sense that it's really, really, really warm, and especially the skin tone of the person in the front, you made it really red. And so for me, this looks like it's somewhere very hot. This is happening. The sunglasses are really also helping out with that. So it is very otherworldly, and it feels very ethereal, but it does invoke a certain tropical aura to it very readily, just because yeah.
Receding universe.
Mm-hmm. I like the colors very much. It's a good assembly of very saturated but toned down with those pastels, and I really enjoy that. Very striking downward movement. This feels like something has dripped down, but it feels soft and it feels quiet and it feels calming. So to me, I mostly have these kinds of peaceful notions coming from this abstract composition. There is a lot of overlap in the colors, and so there's a lot of interest in kind of looking at all of the different hues and shades that it creates. And I enjoy that very much. Even the very subtle ones, like the white on the blue and the way that that kind of shimmers itself. So the overlap also adds three-dimensionality to it, and you have a very strong focal point in the much darker red and black contrasted line in the center. So that's pretty great. Thank you. Next.
Too much jalapeno in the clam sauce.
Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, I don't really see the creative element in this particular image. Pictorially, it's an interesting enough image with the two subject matters here. It is a little bit cheeky, a little bit funny with them opening their mouth so much, but as a creative image, I'm so sorry, I don't think I actually see it. In terms of aesthetics, I would also brighten it up a little bit. It's kind of muddy on the, it's kind of dark on the shaded side, so there isn't a lot of highlight on it. Thank you. Next.
Monochrome, basic, 6 images. Sign of the times.
Very nice use of black and white. I like the kind of desolation of what you are showing here, and especially you pointed out in the title as well. You have good graphical elements here, and I think this is a good composition for something this symmetrical. Facades, I think, are very well photographed just straight on this way. This arch adds a little bit more interest in terms of giving you a curved element in an otherwise very straight, very line by line, very grid pattern kind of element. So that's great. You have lots of textures in the different squares and different shapes of the rectangles that you have. I would clean it up just a little bit. So on the left-hand side, you have on the top corner left, you have just a little bit of that gray peeking out. I would just crop that out or even it out with the gray on the right-hand side. So those two triangles can go. On the left bottom, you have a really small but very, very bright reflection of a window. I could clone that out as well, I think, so that it doesn't pull the eye just as much. And then perhaps I would brighten the 200, which is a strong element and I think could be really interesting, and position myself such that the reflection of the trees behind the 200, for example, are really lined up with it. When you're photographing something this strong in terms of lines, make sure that all of the perspectives match, and that if you are going for symmetry, really, you know, finesse your symmetry, really align yourself with all of the lines that you have in your image. Thank you. Next.
Spotlight.
Mm-hmm. Nice use of the silhouette of the black and white. So here you're silhouetting white on top of black as opposed to the other, but it just works just as well. So the sun is hitting these trees in particular, and so it's illuminating this spot and everything else fades to black. So I do think that this works, especially in black and white. There is a lot going on. You have a lot of chaotic details here. This feels very spiky. This feels very aggressive. You have very strong contrast. If that's what you're going for, I think that's great. I like the movement of the two trees left and right kind of falling away from each other. And then there's this space in between that's adding depth where you kind of pulled in between them. So you feel like you have to walk between the trees and get caught onto their thorns and their branches and their very sharp branches in order to access the background from which you see all of these trees at the very, very top kind of emerge from the shadow. So this is a very aggressive photograph, but I think it works. I would crop the bottom just a tiny bit. Right now you have a little bit of the path visible in front of it, and I think that's giving us too much reprise. I think you should cut that off and start at those grasses already, so that otherwise it feels like I'm standing safe on that path, but I feel like you could even immerse us even more into this composition. Thank you. Next.
Foxtail pine snag, Pinus balfouriana, on the upper slopes of the Kern-Kuia drainage, High Sierra, California.
I think you've captured the chatoyance of the trunk really, really well. I can really see those highlights kind of going around all the way down the trunk of the tree. It's great to have it on the background of this really, really black sky. Very nice contrast there, very good use of black and white. It is a bit unfortunate that the background elements, which are also really beautiful, and you've captured a lot of the mountains, you've captured a lot of the valley down there and the other pines and the rocks. Those are all very interesting elements, but they don't have enough contrast in themselves and they get lost a little bit. And the pines, maybe lower half gets lost in front of them as well. You could have a different perspective where you would walk up to the pine and shoot up into the sky such that you have less overlap between the two, but then you are compressing a little bit more of the tree. But that could be an interesting kind of more powerful, more dynamic view of it if you were able to approach it. For example, you could cut it off a little bit further up as well, or you could do some perhaps selective color of some sort where you keep the sky very, really dark, and the pine, whichever color that is, would potentially contrast a little bit more than in black and white in front of rocks and trees from the background. Thank you. Next.
Fallen Giant, Sonoma 2020.
So here we are really at the base of this structure, this tree, perhaps this knot of brambles, and it does feel like we are underneath it almost. Like the perspective that we have here is that it's almost going to either swallow us or fall on us. And because we only have these spikes and these kinds of organic, kind of this mess of organic branches going on where it's not even distinguishable that it is a tree at all, this feels monstrous a bit in a way, and you're placing us in a perspective, the audience you're placing into a perspective where we are overtaken by it. So in terms of power, this works really well on this image, and I like that. You could increase the contrast a little bit more to get those shadows a little bit more salient, to give that depth at the bottom. You have this kind of almost two eyes in that little void on the bottom there. So that could be something really interesting. You could place something there intentionally as well. But the strength of it is the perspective here. So that's very well seen, and I like that. Thank you. Next.
Misty Morning.
Very nice. It's very ethereal. Actually, the use of black and white here is unusual in terms of you only have a black and a gray. Or rather, I would even say you have a gray and a darker gray, right? You don't have the full range of use of black and white as Ansel Adams would have it with, you know, from full white to full black. Instead, you're focusing on silhouetting something, but you're softening it in the use of your black. So it's very elegant, and it does feel intentional, and I like that very much. To me, it almost feels, because of those lines of posts that you have that are coming at you, it feels like the tree is walking. This might be just an impression that I have, but it does feel like this thing is an entity coming out of the fog and walking towards you on its little path. I like that very much. The placement is very good. You have a minimalist approach to element inclusion, and I like that very much. The only thing is the branch on the left-hand side is a little bit too close to the frame for me. I would have given it just a little bit more room to breathe, but that's something you can clone in even if you wanted to. Thank you. Next.
Still life in black and white.
I like the texturing that you've done. I'm not sure what it is, but I enjoy this very much. It feels like paint, pointillism perhaps, kind of on a rough brush. I like the simplicity of the composition, and I think it works well with this style, with the thick pointillism as well. The fact that everything seems like it is outlined just a little bit also contributes to it. I like that as well. The thing is, I would have made my cropping a little bit different. So the flower is going up and looking to the right, and therefore I would have left more room in between flower and frame on the right and up, because right now the flower is closer to the frame on the right and up. It feels claustrophobic this way. I want to take this vase and move it to the left corner of the picture. But otherwise it is simple, it is clean, it's a nice subject as well, and I think it's conducive to this style. Thank you. Next.
Monochrome, intermediate, 4 images. Light and shadow.
Very abstract, very geometrical, very strong, and the contrast here is between light and dark, of course, but it's also between sharp and soft, because the shadow of the ramp, I suppose, is soft. It's actually blurry compared to the very sharp kind of chicken wire crisscross that you have. So that's nice. I like that. You have this dynamic diagonal going down the image. I wonder if you could crop the image, or could have gone a different time of day where your diagonals actually go from one corner to the next corner. Right now, it doesn't feel like you're utilizing the entirety of the space of the image in a way, because you have it is so pared down, right? And it is so repetitive in some of its elements that any part that is not participating in that diagonal it feels spurious almost to the message. So something to play around with, perhaps, with placing the intersection lines at different points of your rhythm. But otherwise, I think this is well seen, and I like what you see here. Thank you. Next.
Emerging from the dark.
Mm-hmm. Nice contrast, and I think this is a successful use of monochrome, very much so. You do have the softness of the white, but you still have all of the lines and ridges very nicely delineated. The black vignette around it and the fade to black is very elegant. It's very noble feeling. I like that very much. Good composition. The flower is the only subject. It's kind of the central object here as well. You're giving it its due respect. Good placement of the angle, because the tip of the, we're going to say pestle, I'm sorry, I'm not a botanist, is actually bright, and so it stands out on top of the black of the background. It doesn't get lost, but at the same time, the rest of it is black, and it stands out to the white of the petal, which is great as well. So kudos, very, very nice finesse on that. I do wish the front of the petal was not blurred, so perhaps just a slightly bigger aperture just to get that into focus as well. Thank you. Next.
Reaching to the clouds.
To me, this feels like a very long lens. It feels like you are zooming very, very far with the optics. Speculation, but perhaps. And so it does seem like this thing is very high up there, somewhere far away, and you are looking at that detail from far away and bringing it to us because of the background compression, or there aren't a lot of elements in this, but so this is almost a high key photo. It does feel bleach, sun bleach, so I'm getting this kind of element of desert landscape perhaps. And the kind of very pared down simplicity of the elements also kind of echo this. You have very, very high highlights, almost no shadows to speak of. I could say that you could actually bring this to a really high contrast. I mean, you have the brooding clouded sky in the back that actually has shaded areas. You have the very sharp shadow on the cross itself. You could bring those all to black, and that would be a completely different photo. But I like the fact that it's so bright. It does feel like you're walking around in the desert. This is your only solace that you have found, but it is completely bleached out by the elements. Almost feels like a mound of salt. So I like that. Thank you. Next.
Man removing pandanus leaves from the ocean after soaking to whiten and soften them. They are then rinsed, dried, and woven into mats, Tonga.
Mhm. There's a lot of personality actually in this in this image. The first thing I would like to say is that I actually like the vignette that you have, where you have focalized more on this particular subject. I like the little tiny bit of motion blur you have on the foot. I think that adds a little bit more energy too. It's not completely frozen in time. And overall, you've captured a very nice pose and at the same time a lot of feeling. The tiredness that you have, the entire image is actually kind of canted. The person is canted forward, and the image feels like it's leaning also. And so the entire thing looks like it's about to fall over. You're about to fall over being tired with this person as well. And the black and white further adds a punch to that and making it a little bit more, a little bit darker, has a little bit more feeling to it, right? So I like the pose and I like the black and white, but I particularly like this kind of vertigo, this kind of almost tipping over with the person, with the movement of the person, that's emphasized by that dragging. So you have a lot of forces going on and tension here. Thank you. Next.
Monochrome advanced 4 images. Waiting for the bite, Westlake, Hanoi.
Mm-hmm. This almost feels like a frame from a movie to me, actually. This kind of, it's almost comical, this pose. This person has very shiny shoes and they're dressed nice in this coat and the like nice shiny pants and things like this, even the hat. But the pose is completely, detached from the activity itself. Of the fishing, just like perched in this like really crumpled position, so they feel like a character almost. And I think this is fun because it implies further story behind this. I think you have chosen it. The composition well. I like that there's the 3 stones that this person would have to hop over in order to get to where they are, and it's kind of a precarious position, isn't it? Right? Like they look like they might fall over if you were to push them. So there is a lot of there's humor in this, but there's also intentional composition. The black and white emphasizes the cinema kind of feel. So I enjoy that. And you have the entire rod in frame, which is good composition as well. So I think these were some good choices. Thank you. Next.
Emerging.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting kind of subject. To me, this reminds of the Cirque du Soleil O poster, but maybe I'm wrong, I'm not sure. I like that the black and white really emphasizes shape, because this is all about shape, isn't it, right? You have the spirals, but you have this very clearly human shape. In the center, you have a lot of these kind of arcing kind of ovals going around horizontally, and you have the big O going vertically. You have a lot of movement in the human figure that looks like it's piercing at you through the O and through the image and at you in volume. So that's really cool. And then the top stuff that's falling on top of them, because they look like they're arched backwards, it looks like they are kind of being pushed out by this falling movement in the back. So I like the composition. I think that the black and white really works here. You have exactly, like more or less exactly 3 shades. You have this white, you have black, and you have the mid-tone gray, right? If you were to play around with the mid-tone grays and make them different grays, you could emphasize the volume much more, especially in the background elements. This figure that's really black and white, you can bring them out even further by darkening or dodging things that are exactly behind them or giving them a shadow. When elements interact in the photo, in an image, in any image, they look like they're interacting more strongly if they cast shadows onto each other. And so they look like they have a relationship in space to each other. So you can play with that by creating that. Thank you. Next.
Sky drama.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, very dramatic sky, very, very dramatic sky. Lots of contrast, lots of movement, lots of energy in those clouds, very nicely. And it almost looks like it's echoed as above, so below, by these bushes that are strewn about in the foreground that are also kind of just, you know, a little bit haphazardly assembled. And they're also like poofy and just like the clouds on the top. We are grounded by the horizon line, and also by the little houses that we can clearly distinguish kind of in the center-ish of the photo. So this looks like it might have been taken with a wide angle lens, and you have a bit of what looks like the wide angle distortion that you get on the sides of the hyper wide angles specifically, where the tree on the left-hand side looks like it's smeared. This isn't necessarily something you can avoid, barrel and pincushion distortions are a thing, but you can correct it to some extent if you feel like it bothers you in things like Photoshop or Affinity photo and things like that. Just thought I would point that out. Otherwise, it's a nice landscape photo with a lot of energy, and you have a lot of natural elements in it that are quite nice. Thank you. Next.
Frills.
I really like this. I really like this because it's so textural, and it is purely textural. It has no symmetry, but it does have the repetition of one element, right? That there's one type of petal, and that's the petal that's repeated all the way through, but it's folded so differently in every single part of the photo. And then you have a slightly bigger element, if you will, where all of these petals, each of them belongs to kind of a flower, like 4 or 5 petals, and each flower actually belongs to a bundle. Like if you step away a little bit, you can clearly see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bundles, right? So you have hierarchy of elements, which is something explorable in this image. I like how much movement there is. I really like the contrast on this one. I think this is handled really well. You have really sharp white edges, but you do have, you know, this darker shadows between the bundles and inside, going inside of those petals. So there's a lot of volume. This does look like it's standing up at me from the image. So very, very good texture shot. And I enjoy the black and white very much because it really emphasizes the shape and the contrast. Thank you. Next.
Monochrome masters 5 images. Taken with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm. So lots of things going on in this image in terms of not necessarily processing, but kind of filmography choices. So there's very high grain in this image, number 1. Number 2, you have very, very, very blown highlights, especially right in the center of the image that we have here. And you have pretty flat areas overall. There is not a lot of detail contrast, if I may say. So the levels of the grays are actually kind of not as continuous as you would think. This kind of makes me feel like maybe this is a film photo, perhaps, just because of the grain texture and the highlights. The composition itself, it's interesting to take pictures of people doing something else, right? So this person is very focused on this particular art piece. But overall, I'm not sure what the message is here, since we cannot really make out the art piece behind them all that well, or their reaction to it per se. So I'm not sure that the composition has any specific interest that I can discern, not having been there at the time. Thank you. Next.
Deception Pass Bridge, Washington.
This is a very powerful image. Very powerful in the sense of human industry and engineering, which I am a big fan of. I love big wonders of engineering, and I think you've done it justice here. You have included this very small contact point of this gigantic steel bridge, and the choice of angle of attack, the choice of perspective, etc., really really puts emphasis on the strength, but also the beauty of the construction and the lightness and elegance of this frame. And I am all for that. The black and white is beautiful. It really puts valor on that steel work, which is great. You can see all of the different like spider web, but you can actually see the overall shape of the bridge. And not only can you see the overall shape of the bridge, you can also see the fogged up river, the drama of the forest around it. You have a little bit of that vegetation element in the foreground. So this is, you can feel this bridge being very well inscribed in its environment. I don't know how difficult it was to access this vantage point, but you've taken great advantage of that. And I think this is an excellent and very well handled photograph of it. Thank you. Next.
A young girl watches adults dance.
Mm-hmm. A nice instance of just freezing only one element of a scene to bring attention to it. So that little girl eating maybe a sandwich, maybe something else, just absolutely not having any of it. That the expression on that person's face is amazing. I mean, this person is having no fun and actually kind of judging everyone else whom they're watching, right? Just dancing around, and they're just like, well, that's embarrassing, isn't it? So I like that, just to focus, zoom in on a very unlikely participant of an event, but just to bring that forward is really nice. I think the black and white here is probably to get rid of all of the kind of distracting colors. There might have been a lot of them in the image, and to really bring focus on that that child in the center. I like the placement of it up to the right with a bunch of people dancing up to the left to kind of show what it is that is being judged by that person. I do think that it would have been even more effective if that child was looking at something that's in the frame, so we can see that direct relationship of judging or cringing or just overall like what is going on there kind of idea, because right now the shapes of the dancers are not directly actually related to the kid on the right. Thank you. Next.
Stripes with bird.
Mm-hmm. So there is like obviously just regular contrast in this image, which is well handled. There's contrast, of course, of black and white and gray. There's also contrast of textures between feather and fur. But there's also contrast in like meta contrast between the species that we have, right? This is a synergy that we are seeing in nature that is photographed just to purely kind of illustrate that. The zebra stripes are so iconic that we immediately can tell what that is, right? This is a zebra. And so the fact that the bird is perched on the zebra, we immediately get the sense of the relationship between the two in a very kind of distilled way. And I like that very much. The composition is great. You got the angle of the bird just looking at you in profile really, really nicely. The rule of thirds, I suppose, vertically where the bird is placed is really nice. And I like the kind of rippling of the muscles on the zebra stripes as well. So this is also very pleasant aesthetically, sorry, in addition to the meta contrast and the nature interest. Thank you. Next.
The light.
Mm-hmm. So cards on the table. I am in love with this image. It is really beautiful. It is so clean, right? Every single line is delineated and sharp, and it's all about the light and the shadow. The fact that you take in just, I don't know, I don't even know which time this was taken at, but it looks like it is illuminated almost by a spotlight. It doesn't feel like natural illumination almost, and the light hits those crosses just right, and they're the shiniest and brightest aspect of this image on an almost completely and fully blackened sky. Lots of great details I can talk about with the kind of the bushiness of the tree, that's full of leaves on the right-hand side, and you can kind of see the texture of the leaves. But at the same time, on the left-hand side, you have almost only branches that are silhouetted in front of the white stone masonry. That's beautiful. And so you have contrast between life and death. And so that goes into this, the entire theme of the church being presented here. The cleanliness of the lines is very enjoyable. The fact that it's very nicely positioned in frame and the light hitting it from the side, the crosses being so bright because being the focus of the image, but also the focus of the theme here, right? This is a church. This is the most important part of the church. This is a symbol of the church, and it's being brightly illuminated this way. So frankly, really kudos, masterful execution. Thank you. Next.
Okay, we'll take a 5 to 10 minute break and come back with the second half. We'll go with the next half. And
Okay, we're on to nature. Basic 4 images. Osprey, Pandion haliatus, also called fishhawk, are known to eat more than 80 different species of fish. This osprey has picked up a crappie out of Lake Sonoma.
For a nature shot, I think this is very nice. We have an interaction between 2 different species, which I always appreciate. Very good sharp focus on both of them and nice position frame. I don't see anything being cropped or cut off, which is nice. We see the heads of both species, and we have enough elements on both of them to recognize both of them. So there are enough identifying features, and I think that's a strength in nature specifically. Otherwise, this is a very fun picture to look at. Honestly, I think it's pretty awesome. The fact that both the bird and the fish are facing the same direction and this kind of same expression on them, that's also pretty cool. That's a bonus point, not necessarily nature related. Otherwise, nice light, good shadows, good colors, and good choice of depth of field. Thank you. Next.
The European paper wasp, Polistus dominula, is a dominant paper wasp in North America. Most Polistes eat caterpillars. This wasp's appetite for a variety of insects gives it a competitive advantage.
So this is a very nice macro shot. We have a lot of things to look at to identify this particular insect. You're giving us a lot of detail. I do wish that more of it was in focus. When it comes to nature, I would like to see more of the animal distinguishable and sharp, especially if you're going for a portrait like this. But that is difficult to do, especially in such a very tiny scale, understandably. So good lighting, good color, good contrast. As a nature story, this is very much a portrait, and you are giving us that paper nest that it's building with the hexagons. So in the title, I do wish that you would tell us a little bit more about what's in the image, right? You're telling us about what it's eating, but in the image, you're showing us the very interesting paper construction in the background. So I think that would have been a better way to announce your story through the title. Thank you. Next.
Sierra shooting star, Primula jeffrey E, in a damp meadow around 10,000 feet near the Great Western Divide, High Sierra, California.
So this is flora instead of fauna, which I always appreciate in nature. You have good control of your color here in the shading. So I feel like if I were to see this flower in the wild, thanks to your image, I could identify it pretty well. Nice positioning, and you have a little bit of the context of the other flowers around it. Overall, this is a nice portrait of a plant that I enjoy, and you have enough of the features there in terms of how it's growing and the fact that you have 2 of them, this pointing this way in kind of an unusual shape. I think you photographed it well. Thank you. Next.
The green anole, sorry, lose my voice. Hemidactylus gnotri E is related to iguanas, but not a true chameleon. Like all common Hawaiian lizards, assumed to stow away on Polynesian voyaging canoes.
Very sharp picture of this particular lizard. It does recede a little bit into defocus on his like upper leg, for example, but I think it's all right because enough of it is in focus in addition to the leaf. Otherwise, I like how the rest recedes into blurriness in the background. Very good lighting on it. I do love the vignette around it because it really puts kind of sharply emphasizes the lizard. In terms of a nature story, it's very cool that you have it camouflaged on a leaf like this because it kind of showcases the environment in which this kind of lizard would live and what it would use to survive, i.e. the camouflage, but it is very, very sharp and distinct, and therefore we can still make it out of the image while appreciating the camouflaging pattern. So lots of identifying features. I do enjoy the little story about how it might have gotten here, the stowaway on the boats. I think that's a good tidbit to add. Considering the habitat of the lizard. Thank you. Next.
Nature Intermediate, 4 images. Mating American kestrels, Falco sparvarius. These small falcons mating in early April 2021 produced 2 offspring that fledged in late July.
Mm-hmm. So this particular nature story is interesting because you are saying that you have followed through on this particular pair because you said that they have produced offspring, 2 offspring. Here we see specifically the mating behavior, which is well displayed. Again, recognizing features on the actual species, so that's always very good. I do wish that because you're not making it a sequence and you're not showing the actual offspring that you potentially have witnessed. In terms of nature story, you could have also emphasized, described something about the patterns of mating, about the, I don't know, if there are monogamous species, for example, or something like this, because that is the specific behavior that is displayed specifically in this particular photo. But I do like the fact that you are pointing to the idea that you have followed through with these and you, yeah, you've seen the offspring. Thank you. Next.
Whoa.
This Sierra Nevada foxtail pine, Pinus balfouriana, which is believed to be able to live 3,000 years, is a rare high elevation pine endemic to California and closely related to the bristlecone pine.
Pictorially, I really like this kind of power shot of this pine, a very unusual placement in frames on the right-hand side and going out as opposed to from the bottom and going up. I like the really, really dramatic sky and the clouds behind it, and the kind of granulosity of the clouds is reflected in kind of the really small branches of the pine. And you have really good color on this as well, very good contrast. This is a very good image to look at, I think, and to explore. So pictorially, very good job. In terms of nature story, I do think it also works. I like that you have enough distinguishing patterns on the pine where I can see the bark very clearly. I can see the colors, like the specific kind of sienna ochre color, kind of almost orange of the bark. As well as the specific green of the leaves. I like that I can see the shapes of leaves. I could identify this particular tree. You do mention in the title something about high altitude. I like that you're giving this detail of where it lives and where I can find that tree. And maybe it informs a little bit of why the leaves are so small, for example, and things like that. Thank you. Next.
This Rufus Hummingbird, Solus forest rufus, fans its tail feathers in a display of aggression at the feeding area it has claimed. It tirelessly chases away other hummers with its fast darting flight.
Mm-hmm. Something so small, so vicious. I have seen these hummingbirds just like fight to the death when there was a feeder for them that was big enough for 700 hummingbirds. So I've witnessed this behavior and it's very funny. This is a magnificent picture of a hummingbird mid-flight. The fact that you have captured it in such a good pose with such perfect depth of field and focus on it is it's very beautiful. So really kudos on a magnificent portrait, and the fact that you have the light filtering through those feathers on the tail is really nice. So I can see the display that you were speaking of. I can see the entirety of the bird. There's a little bit of motion blur on the wings, which is actually kind of nice. Actually, a bit of dynamic element here. Otherwise, just very, very sharp, very well-controlled portrait nature story here. Thank you. Next.
3 cygnets. A not to die cygnus awaken from their sleep in the early morning hours. As with all birds and mammals, cygnets yawn when in a relaxed or drowsy state. Ellis Creek Wetlands, May 2021.
So much softness and like familial comfort in this image, isn't there? Everything is so fluffy and so warm and so the way that the light is hitting them from the side and showing all of the little bits of the fur, little hairs, and especially how it's filtering through the red of the beak of the yawning one. It's delightful.
Yeah.
Absolutely delightful. So this is a very kind of close up, very candid shot of these 3 babies. I think this is very well focused. This is very well captured. It's a very interesting thing to look at in addition to being very cute. And overall, you've captured all 3 of them very nicely. All 3 of them have expressions that are different. All 3 of them have slightly different poses, but they're all like bunched up together. So there's a relationship between the 3 members of the species that is understandable as well. A little bit of in the environment, but I think that's just a bonus point here for the nature story. Good placement, good sharp focus, and good nature story. I think it is nice to see those 3 babies all on their own, kind of in a little bit more of a zoomed in kind of cuddling context and their intimacy there. Thank you. Next.
Nature Advanced, 2 images. A bald eagle, Haliaetus leucocephalus, soars above the bay, clutching seaweed in the dripping remains of a half-eaten fishtail in his talons. Homer Spit, Alaska.
So absolutely glorious pose. I mean, to have the face of the eagle just framed with the primaries like that, oh my God, that is excellent. Unfortunately, the entire photo is a little bit motion blurred. Nothing is quite sharp. So that's a little bit of an unfortunate detriment to the quality of the image itself. Otherwise, I really like the pose, very recognizable species here. But I like that we can see what it's carrying. There's even a little speck of blood that's falling out of that severed fish head, which adds to the drama, really. I like that you can see the seaweed as well. So we can see the behavior, and you are telling us about this specific thing. You're more describing the image than giving us more information or a story in the title. So maybe just a little bit of to be worked on in terms of nature story. Thank you. Next.
Brooks River Hierarchy, 1 of 4. The brown bears of Katmai National Park must compete for the best fishing locations near the famous falls. Downstream, weaker mothers with cubs and subadults predominate. Closer to the falls, larger bears must be aggressive to claim the most favorable fishing locations. Just below the falls is a coveted fishing location, as fish tired from trying to scale the falls are easier to catch. The stronger bears are seen here. The most aggressive and successful bear, as evidenced by his scars, claims the prime spot atop the falls where he waits for fish to almost jump into his mouth.
Very good use of the sequence. You are describing to us the actual hierarchy, not just of the species, but also of the geography that we are seeing, like the different steps of the falls. Just coming up to this, you could think like, oh, random bears just go randomly where fish are. But actually, no, there's a very specific structure here in terms of the environment and the geography and the ecosystem and how the species are navigating this ecosystem. So it's a very interesting nature story. Like, I'm learning things here and I really enjoy that. The bears are all nicely sharp in focus, very good lighting. The second image particularly is very powerful, like kind of the zoomed in version and the 2 bears fighting. That's pretty great. I love the idea that you are going up in rankings. And so you start with the weaker bears and you go to the stronger, and then the prime spot with the kind of the king bear who has been weathered through fighting. And duels in his life. So that's actually a very good progression as well. So I feel like I'm being told a story in addition to just learning things, right? So very good narrative element there. Otherwise, just very good aesthetic pictures overall. I think they all have interest on their own as well. Thank you. Next. They're also fluffy. Mhm. And that one has a fish, so that's even better.
Nature Masters, 4 images. Moon jelly, Medusa luna del Pacifico, can swim on its own. It gently pulses to move within the currents, traveling up and down, back and forth to find food, like swarms of tiny plankton.
A very poetic image. For nature, I can see 3 specimens here. And they're all kind of in different orientations. So it gives me an interesting kind of 3D view of what one might look like, right? So I see it's under different angles, and that adds interest to the nature story here. Very nicely placed in frame, very good lighting and color composition here. Everything looks very nice and very well posed. So I think it's a good portrait. It's almost the Picasso, right? Where you have like all the different orientations, but in one shot, if you will. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of reminiscent of that. So nice portrait in that sense. Thank you. Next.
A non-breeding adult white pelican, Pelicanus erythrorhynchus, glides effortlessly across the water in Bodega Bay.
So I do wish that there was a little bit more of a story there, because you are describing that it is gliding, but I see that it is gliding. You are saying a non-breeding adult, and I don't know what that means, non-breeding. Is that like a very specific hierarchy within the species? Is that a choice that they make? Is that a choice that their social structure makes for them? I don't know. And so when you have this kind of element in here, I'm intrigued by it, and then I get no information. So I'm gonna have to Google it later. So I would like that to be part of your story in the title if you choose to mention it. Otherwise, the photo itself, I think it's interesting that it's looking directly at you as it is gliding. You have a lot of interesting colors there. And the mirror reflection is actually quite striking. So I think pictorially it is interesting in that sense as well. It is perhaps a little bit soft, maybe just a tiny bit. It might be a compression. Sometimes, you know, on the computer, when you show things through Zoom, they compress. And so it looks a little bit lower resolution than it actually is on your end. So maybe that's just my eyes. So thank you. Next.
The green iguana is mostly a herbivorous species in the iguana family. Green iguanas have excellent vision, enabling them to detect shapes and motions at long distances.
This is a very nice specimen. I like the pose that you have with this tree trunk in front, where there's a lot of dynamic kind of depth to the image, because the elements on the front, so the head and the paw, are very clearly bigger, and the rest of the body is receding back. You have a lot of colors on there, and I wonder if it is the lighting inside of the environment that they're in. So there's like a lot of blue light to the side and a lot of green light kind of coming down onto it. So very colorful image, but I think you have captured all of these like folds on the neck very nice. I can see the scales, I can see the coloration patterns on top of its back. So I could recognize him if I were to encounter that lizard. I like the detail of the digits, right? The fact that some of them are longer and some of them are shorter. You have the nails that are sharp as well, the claws. So lots of great detail to explore. I do wonder if this was shot through maybe a pane of glass. There seems to be a very big kind of, I don't know, smudge right on the front of it, right? Like on the front of its belly, seems to be a soft spot in the image. So I wonder if that just angling a little bit away from that spot, or maybe it's something on the camera, I'm not sure. Anyway, from a perspective of nature, it's a very nice portrait. It's very well posed. It's very interesting to look at. So nice job. Thank you. Next.
On a treetop, a martial eagle, Polemantus bellicosus, eats its prey. This huge eagle species can have a wingspan of 8 feet and are easily recognized by the spotted white breast and the legs. Kenya.
So here you are bringing attention to a very specific recognizable pattern on the legs, the white, the specks and on the legs. And they are present in your photo. So that's important since you are drawing attention to it. And in addition to that, I think this works as a nature story because I wouldn't have known to try to recognize this by the specific feature. I wouldn't have known that this is a feature very particularly special to this species, because maybe many species have this feature. So to point out a very specific trait on a species that's featured on your picture is a good nature strategy for nature pictures. Otherwise, very good lighting. I can see the eye very clearly, even though there's a bit of that shadow of the wing, it's not detrimental. And the fact that it is very clearly pulling apart something else that is very living and bloody adds a lot of drama to the image. I would even maybe place it, crop it so that it's central, because for nature, that's a pretty... Next.
Pictorial, basic, 3 images.
All right.
Those hongos, bizarre moonlit landforms, locally called mushrooms, Valle de la Luna, Ichigualasto Park, La Rioja province, Argentina.
I am besotted with this photograph. It is extraordinary. So I really like the composition here and the lighting, and all of this looks like it's from a completely different planet, right? This looks like it has been photographed somewhere, not even on the moon. No, the moon would not show such interesting things. This has been photographed on some other world out there somewhere. And so this makes me dream, essentially. The Milky Way stripe across the entire horizon is beautifully resolved. Very nice coloration in it, in that core, just absolutely gorgeous to look at. And then this moonlight kind of completely white, blanched, bleached lighting, but also kind of soft on these very interesting formations. It's very cool that there's 2 of them, but they're different enough so that they're not exactly symmetrical, but they are echoing each other. And so it has that element of repetition to it where because there's 2 of them, this means that there must be probably more. And so this is a recurring thing that exists within this landscape. You kind of see some of them in the back in addition to that as well. So it makes it a feature of the landscape, makes it even weirder, right? So very nicely photographed. I love the shadows that they cast, even though you don't really see the source of the light, because the Milky Way doesn't feel like it's illuminating it. You feel like it's coming from somewhere else. And so it has this kind of twilight feeling where it's really bright, actually. You feel like you're walking in daylight, but you're clearly not because of the starry sky. And so this melange of, day and night, and, star and moon, which wouldn't be seen at the same time, is really effective. So it's kind of like that Mondrian painting where the foreground is moonlit, but the sky is a day sky. So this kind of has that feeling to it somewhat. Very, very beautiful job. Thank you. Thanks.
Harlista, Chicano-style motorcycle club, 6th annual oyster run, Portuguese beach.
The figures here, there's a lot to look at, right? There's a lot of different faces in there, but the most important, the most interesting one is the one you featured in the foreground, right? And that person is the only one looking directly at the camera and at us. And so it kind of arrests us in our track where we feel like we're pinned by the look. But what I think is also interesting is that all of those people that you see, and there's a lot of them, they all seem completely englobed and overwhelmed in the machinery that they're sitting on, all of these motorcycles. There seems to be a lot of power. They're taller than some of these people. There's so much of it, you don't even see the ground. Everything is just wheel and chrome and steel, right? And so it does give this the sense of power that these machines have, right? With those, there's a sense of rhythm and depth as you go further out. You have more and more people, they're smaller and smaller, but the emphasis remains on that main important foreground element. Next.
Full moon rising over San Francisco.
So this also has this kind of element of otherworldliness, because you have, so I need to plug my computer in, it's about to die. Give me 1 second. I had a moment of panic here where I thought that by plugging my computer, I unplugged the microscope, but I didn't. Okay. The gigantic microscope that's in the other room that's 6 feet tall. Okay, all right, back to the picture. So sense of otherworldliness, because it feels like almost a collage, right? All of the foreground elements and the background elements are kind of like stuck on top of each other. There's almost no shadows that anything is casting onto anything else. So they look like stickers on top of one another, like a decoupage. Also because all of these elements are so different from one another, right? So there's the trees in the foreground, and there's the Presidio dome, which is a completely different architectural style from anything else. Then there's the little the kind of living houses, and there's the sky rise, and there's the pyramid, and finally there's the moon, which is just kind of stuck there, right in the middle. And so all of these things seem like an assembly, an intentional assembly that you've decided to put together. But it is the same city, as we all know. So that's very interesting in that way. It does seem like the shadows have been lifted here. There's some halos, especially I think around the Presidio and the pyramid, for example, where it looks like some of these elements were a lot darker, or maybe the houses were a lot darker and you've lifted them into the foreground. But unfortunately, that has the effect of flattening these things together. And so that gives kind of the effect of sticker that I was talking about, because the illumination seems very flat across all of the layers, right? Even though there are different colors and there are different, black and white shapes inside of each, the overall illumination in all the layers is the same, right? There's a little bit too much sky, like everything seems really compressed in the bottom of the image. There's kind of nothing going on towards the top. There's a lot going on at the bottom. So everything looks pressed down, especially since the moon is so far down on the image, but it is interesting to have it overlap with the buildings. So that gives them a relationship. Thank you. Next.
Pictorial intermediate, 7 images. Sunbeams, Sierra Nevada, around 10,000 feet.
Wow, that's very strong. That's kind of cool. I like the shaping that you have where it goes into the diagonal, into the corner. The sunbeams themselves go into the corner of the image. I think that's a good dynamic element where you play. The frame is part of the composition of any image, right? So it is a structural element within your photograph. So to use it in a smart way, it can always add something to the image potentially. I would have liked you to perhaps frame that with the big tall trees a little bit more intentionally. So the left-hand tree, for example, is too cut off to feel like it's really part of the image itself. So perhaps include it and really have those 2 pillars like stand guard in front of this sunbeam illumination, so they look like they're part of the phenomena, for example. Or you can exclude it entirely, but actually like it as a framing element on the left-hand side. So I would have included more of it. Thank you. Next.
Portrait of a boy.
Mm-hmm. This is a very well-handled portrait. The illumination is very nice. He looks very surprised. He looks like he was caught off guard by someone snapping the picture as if he was just looking to the side and then suddenly realizes the camera pointed at him. And so there's a little bit of a stunned expression here with a very highly raised eyebrows. And I always really like these kinds of shots that show some sort of reaction, some sort of expression. I think this is very well handled. The lighting is very nice, very on point. You have the catch light in the eyes. Everything looks lively and alive. And you have a good warmth on the skin tones as well. I like the hat. I don't know if that was your choice or not your choice, but I do like it very much. And I think it adds a lot to the personality, and it contrasts really well with the color of the chemise that he's wearing, which is actually matching the color of his eyes, which is also a very good choice in addition to that. So very good work on kind of light and shadow, burning and dodging that you may or may not have done, but feels like maybe you have shaped a little bit of that background at least. A little bit around him. So very nicely done. Very good job. Next.
Boy Joy.
Nice expression. I always enjoy seeing natural expressions like this on subjects on the photographs. It seems like you have captured a nice moment. In terms of posing, you have the entire person in shot. Unfortunately, you have a bit of motion blur on the leg. It's a little bit distracting, I would say. But it is nice how he is posed inside of the Y shape of the tree. Otherwise, the lighting is quite flat. Everything is kind of the same uniform. It looks like they are in a shaded spot under the tree. There's a little bit of dappling that looks maybe perhaps a little bit too blown out. You have highlights that were perhaps overblown and then you try to push them down. So now they look like big splotches of a darker gray. So just watch out for that. Thank you. Next.
Just around the corner.
Really enjoyed the minimalistic composition to play with architecture like this, to take us on a journey. Very nice, very Alice in Wonderland because of all of the bold colors, the very broad strokes, the kind of graphic elements, the kind of cartoonish almost thick lines and outlines that we have. So very kind of pop here. At the same time, however, the shadows feel a little bit purple, a little bit blue. So that's a nice contrast. So maybe a little bit of split toning going on here that I appreciate to kind of offset the really, really red. You could go even further. With that, you could clean some of the little bits and pieces, for example, little white spots on the wall. If you really wanted to take it to that Andy Warhol place, right? You could do that, but I actually like that you don't, and you have these little, nicks and crannies that your eye can go into. So what I really like is the composition of where that door is. So you have this leading line of the path curving to the left, but this tunnel is taking you to the right, correct? So you have tension between the motion that you want to continue and around the bend and the fact that this kind of entrance is beckoning for you to go off the path to the right. So there's good tension there. Very good placement towards the back so that the beckoning shadow, which is the darkest point in your image, it becomes therefore the focal point of your image, is kind of towards the back. So you need to go and reach it. You need to enter the space in order to go find out what's there. And I think that's really, really cool. Loving the colors, and I like the play of shadow. And I also really like the optical illusion here of the left-hand white wall. Because it's cutting that path in such a straight vertical line, it's kind of almost an optical illusion to find out if it is in front, in the foreground, or if it is empty space kind of behind that wall, if it's cut off and there's a cliff there, right? There's a little bit of that optical illusion that I appreciate. I like the cleanliness of the lines. It's like they have a lot of verticals, but also some curves. There's a good balance there. Thank you. Next.
October Color, Deer Creek Valley, Colorado.
Lots of saturation, lots of bright colors here in the blue of the sky and the ochres and the siennas and the kind of canary yellows and even the greens that you have at the bottom. You have a really nice transition on the left between the green, the trees that are still green, and into the yellows and into the reds and into the more kind of burnt sienna on the right. So I think that's kind of a nice shape here. There's a lot of, you know, kind of massive power of this gigantic mountain that you are picturing here. Almost no ground on the foreground, which is nice. And then you go directly into this really big mound. It's beautifully illuminated, but you have enough shadows there. You have enough of a tilt of the light to get shadows into the nooks and crannies of the rocks that are kind of almost like a crown on top of that mountain of erosion. And so you can really make out all of those jagged shapes like teeth on top. So that's really nice. Lots of drama and power in this one. But overall, it is also a very linear composition. So everything goes from left to right and right to left. There's not a lot of depth creating, right? Because we're just immediately presented with this cliff. So there is nothing going kind of deeply into the image or diagonally into the image. Nothing is leading us into it. This is kind of more of a poster of this thing. So thank you. Next.
Joy.
Mm-hmm. This is a good expression because it's kind of in between, right? It is not quite just, you know, a smile. It's something that before the smile, this is someone who is enjoying themselves, but they're just kind of in between expressions. And I think that's kind of interesting, kind of nice. The lighting is nice and you see so much color and you see some of the beautiful architecture behind it. So I think that also gives a lot of context for it. There's movement, the way that her earrings are swaying to the side. That's really nice because it really indicates that she is moving alongside with the elements behind it. You have another dancer in the background. They are a little bit more fuzzy, so the emphasis is really on the one in the front, but it's nice to give an echo of this person is not doing this activity alone. Overall, as far as kind of event or street photography, I think this is really nice. The only kind of nitpicky element that I would change is the column on the left is cut exactly just to a sliver. I would either include the whole column, just crop the entire thing, because my eye just keeps going to that very thin sliver shape of orange on the left-hand side. So just a nitpick here. Thank you. Next.
Just add baguette.
Mm-hmm. I really like, so in French, they're called nature morte. These compositions in English are called still life, sorry. Yeah, so very nice still life. And I particularly like the colors that you've chosen here. So in art, still lives is something, the Dutch ones, from what I know, they were actually kind of resumes for painters to show off all of the textures that they could paint. So, oh, look, here is a little bit of flower, here's a little bit of the peach fuzz, here I know how to paint glass reflections onto a chalice, and I know how to draw metal, and I know how to draw fur of game and feathers and things like this. And so that's why they have all of these disparate, lots of elements. And the more you have, the more different textures you could draw, the better your resume, the better you're going to be hired as an artist to draw all these things, right? To paint all these things. So here you have all of these inclusion of elements. So you have some things that are very detailed and some things that are very smooth. Some things that you have the metal reflections on the spoon, and you have the gelatin that's kind of in the spoon, which is kind of all reflection-y and weird and transparent. So you have all of these little details that are kind of talking to each other. Let's say three colors that you have, this kind of luscious green and this really, really dark burgundy kind of wine red on the tomatoes is so noble and rich and gorgeous, and I want to just bite into it. So it's very nice. I like the dark background of it. And I really like the inclusion of the metal spoon. It's just an extra element, but that adds so much to the composition because it's not just vegetal. Suddenly you have a metal element to kind of solidify the entire thing and to have the kind of vivacity of the lush green elements play off of the cold, dead metal of the spoon that is still beautifully wrought. It has all these little detail elements of jewelry on it. My concern here is the out of focus elements, right? So the spoon is out of focus. and the leaves of the basil up front are also out of focus. And it's a little bit unfortunate for such a strong composition, such strong elements. The spoon itself is very nice, and I like the way the light falls onto it. But the gelatin bit, which is a very interesting bit, and there's the only one of it. There's 3 tomatoes, there's 3 green things, but there's only one gelatin, which is particularly interesting because it has all of these little reflections inside, sorry, the transparency of it. It's too far to the left, and so my eye just wanders all the way over there, spends a lot of time over there, kind of almost off of the image. So I would place it into a spot a little bit more central, or a little bit more intentionally central in the picture. Right, because you have control of every single placement element in a composition such as this. Any sort of deviation from perfect placement will be immediately noticeable, because it is assumed that it is a controlled composition. There's no room for, you know, not error, I would say. There's no room
Talking about.
Thank you. Next.
Pictorial advanced, 7 images. Faded beauty.
Mhm. This is kind of an odd angle to look at this, because it does feel to me like the photograph doesn't have a proper orientation. Not that you did it wrong or anything like this. It's just that if I feel like I need to rotate this picture, but then in the other orientation, I would also feel like I need to rotate this picture. But in the other orientation, I also would feel like I would need to rotate it even one more time. And so it kind of feels to me that because the orientation is basically essentially from the top, right? It could have any orientation, but none of them seem quite right. It is a darker photo. Everything is kind of in shadow. There's not a lot of highlights there. So it's kind of very muted, but I think it actually matches the theme and the kind of aggressive thistle that you have behind the, I don't know what that flower is called, behind the pink flower. So I kind of feel like that matches. My only kind of, let's say, not concern, but just the white flowers in the background feel a little bit too haphazard. I really like the brown background, actually. I think it matches really well with the theme, with the darkness of it, with the mood of it that's kind of brooding and, as you mentioned, faded in the title. The white flower is a little bit too cheery, but at the same time, they're too behind everything. And especially the one on the left-hand side with the green stalks, it's not even facing towards the main subject. And so it feels like it's just unintentionally cropped. So I would reposition those. Yeah, next.
White.
Mm-hmm. Very high key, but so this reminds me personally of Yukie, Japanese ink paintings, because you have a really, really, really fine line and a kind of a watercolor feel to the filling ins of the colors, but very subdued colors, very muted tones, at the same time with very sharp detailing, very small, sharp detailing. And so that's exactly what this feels like to me. I think this is achieved very nicely. A very naturalistic kind of subject as well would match that style. I would not include that white stripe at the bottom. I would cut it off to make it look like it's hanging in midair a little bit more, and to simplify the composition, because all you need really for this kind of simplicity and purity is the spider and the structural element by which it is hanging. I think that would strengthen the image. Yeah. Otherwise, well done. Thank you. Next.
Tree with a view.
Mm-hmm. So much life, right? It's so vibrant. And it's not just life in the colors that we have, but it's also life in just the proliferation of those branches. There's so many of them and they're so dense, right? But they're at the same time so curly, and they really look like they're extending to the left, just reaching out into the sky. So here, I think the superposition of elements is really nicely done. You have a really big tree in the front, right? But you've chosen to place the trunk almost all the way to the right, because all of the intention of the image is you're giving to the movement of the branches to the left, right? They're really all crawling to the left of the image, and that's really effective. So I'm having a lot of fun following all of the sinuous curves. And at the same time, because it's moving us to the left, suddenly, as I follow all of these branches, my eye suddenly falls onto the next layer behind it. The next layer behind it is this just gorgeous cliffside, right? You have a bunch of islands and inlets. You see a little bit of a beach. You see like 3 layers of mountains in the background. That's amazing. That's so much compressed into such a small horizontal space there, but that gives us really a lot of depth. So this is an image where there's a really big imbalance actually between foreground and background elements, but they're both very rich in very different ways. And so in a sense, they do complement each other quite well. The first foreground element is really overwhelming. It's very flat and it's very just like in front of you. The small background element is, you know, very small in the picture, but it has so much depth that it also has a lot of interest in that direction. So those play together. I think it's very effective in my perspective. So I like that. And I like this unusual and unconventional choice of composition. Thank you. Next.
A spectator.
This one is grandiose, right? Because you've included that tiny little human element in the foreground, that one silhouette that actually detaches itself very well from the background and all the drama that's going on down there, you do have this anchor point. And so when you place something like this in the image, you're basically placing the viewer in that spot as well, right? We are looking out into the same landscape as this person is as well. And so that gives us a connection and an anchor point from where to perceive this picture. And I like that. It is strong enough as a foreground element as well to be immediately noticed. You have a bit of a halo around that person. So perhaps a processing quirk, I would just adjust that just a little bit to blend it, make it fully silhouetted that way. Just a small nitpick. Let's talk about the drama, right? Those colors are phenomenal. Really, really, really sharp and bright colors, super saturated. But at the same time, it's not gaudy, right? It does feel very solemn as far as sunsets go. And it does look like the sun is already or still below the horizon. And so you don't have this like bright, you know, circle disk of the sky. In the sky, you have just the remnants, just that leftover color, right? So it does have a little bit of this nostalgia kind of wrapped into it because the sun has already gone. This is just what's left behind, the kind of beauty that comes after. So there's that sense to it. I wonder if the horizon line is not level. I would level it out just a little bit. I think it's not level. Yeah. Next.
Tree gnome.
It is nice to document these kinds of things when you see them because they are very interesting to look at, right? This is definitely not in a tree, but it also does look like kind of a living thing or a person or something like this. Unfortunately, compositionally, it is a little bit weak. It is very kind of documentary. It does feel like a photo you took of something. Oh, I saw this interesting thing. But pictorially, it doesn't actually have a lot going for it. I am interested in looking at this shape, but I'm not really getting that any of the other elements in the photo, including like lighting or angle or depth of focus, are really putting it forward and presenting it in an interesting way. Especially the lighting on this is really, really flat. The illumination is just completely flattening out everything, and the colors are very bland. Next.
the Wizard's Hat Sea Stack,
Mhm.
Bend Beach, Oregon.
Mhm. This is also a very serene composition, very beautiful puzzle of elements. Here, you've positioned yourself and the sun exactly in this kind of dip between the rocks. It's very nicely just hanging there, but it feels like you could draw a thread to that dip. It feels intentional, very, very intentional. And then the fact that you have made it such that one of the pools will reflect the sun as well is really, really cool. I really like that. This, you could imagine you could have taken a portrait composition, so you could crop it such that the verticality of the right-hand side rock would play with the verticality of your framing. I personally really enjoy the kinds of images, portrait images that have a lot of sky and kind of more elements on the bottom. So I think that could be a really interesting composition if you include as well the reflection of the peak. So that could play well. But I also like the fact that you're giving so much of that horizon line. You do have a high concentration of interest in the center that grounds the photograph very much, but the expanse of everything else, of the rest of the pools and the rest of the rocks around it, also give it a little bit more of a serene feel. If it were portrait, it would be a lot more claustrophobic in a way and a lot more anxious, whereas this gives you this room to breathe and to center yourself onto that dot. So I think that's really nice. Thank you. Next.
Soft Waters.
Mhm. I like your choice of shutter speed, where you have completely made the water into silk that ripples down those very, very wet rocks very nicely. The rocks themselves, I like the color that you have on it. You have high saturation and really beautiful contrast between the yellows and the greens. I think that's really nice. And they almost look like wet opal to me, just because I think you have really nice textures on those rocks, and the water adds a soft element to it, to the really hard element of the rock, and the striation and the layerings that you have is also adds a lot of interest as well. Your leading line is mostly to the left, but it feels like it's canted this way, kind of it's leaning towards the right-hand side. And I wonder if leveling it out just a little bit could give you a little bit of a more grounded composition. Because if you're going for a Dutch angle, where you're really going for the angle is part of the composition, I feel like you might want to do it a little bit more drastically, perhaps. So maybe the striation lines are actually very much more on the diagonal, maybe. But otherwise, perhaps would try to level it out, see if you like it that way, and then adjust further on. Thank you. Next.
Pictorial Masters, 8 images. Missed Opportunity, Red Light District, Bangkok, 2020.
Mm-hmm. So this also kind of have this kind of almost cinematographic feel to it. I mean, the portrait format would make it non-cinematographic, but in choice of colors, in the choice of subject, in the choice of composition, it does kind of feel this way of something you would see in a movie. This very, very, very bright neon, almost red light that's falling onto the characters. We can distinguish the characters very well, and there's kind of this anxiety in the positioning of them. They're kind of standing around, but a little bit unnatural way, kind of like automatons waiting to be activated a little bit. And then there's this like more masculine figure in front that is providing almost a threatening aspect to it. They're so forward in the image, you don't see their faces. It does feel very aggressive in that way. So to position this element in such a like, you know, strong position pose as well. So I think it's effective. at the message that I think I'm getting from this with the red frame. Everything does look like it is frantic and fast and but also dangerous. Thank you. Next.
Adrift.
This is basically a Rothko painting, or what I think when I think of Rothko paintings. This is basically an image of serenity, right? It's so ethereal. It's the sky reflected in a puddle, but there's this, you know, almost like the scales of a music sheet of these horizontal bars that bring you further and further up. It's like a ladder for you to climb up into that sky and fly away, essentially. And it's softened by those kind of horizontal curves that you have at each step. I don't even know if it's a picture of some rocks, like some plinths on the sidewalk, or if those are like salt flats that you're taking from an airplane. I don't know. Whatever they are, they're very soft and very, very pleasant to look at. And there is an evolution and there is a depth to the image as you walk further and further out. And I like that each of the, I'm going to call them plinths, they're slightly different colors. So there's like blue, white, white, blue, white, blue, blue, etc. So that's almost like a scale you could play. Thank you. Next.
Red Jacket Lake, Upper Peninsula, Michigan.
There's a lot of color here, but it is all softened by this line of fog in the center. So here, there is also symmetry here in that reflection, right? And you've included more of the reflection that you've included of the original, which is also pretty cool. And the reflection itself is breaking up. So you have the little ripples, especially at the front. And so it almost looks like it's pixelating the trees, right? So it looks like maybe a rendering. And so that's an interesting thing because the symmetry is not perfect. So you see something different in the reflection than you see in the original. The very, very white trunks of the birch trees are very interesting elements that add the vertical element to otherwise very horizontal, very linear composition. And so it gives that kind of staccato feeling that is nice. But mostly I'm really enjoying the contrast between the really vibrant colors and this line of fog that's traversing the image. So very nice. I would even, perhaps this is something that you could even take a much longer kind of panorama of, and I think you could even further add to it, basically to the sides to keep going. Thank you. Next.
I caught it.
Mm-hmm. It's very kind of like absolutely like point of the moment, action, point of action, moment of action. Either way, you have captured the action really well here. Just very nice, frozen in time as both of these people are in midair. Very, very nice sports moment here. I like the fact that the ball is held up right here. There's so much energy, but it's also immediately parsable which game these people are playing and what they're doing. The fact they're from different teams, I assume, because of the different colors of their jerseys. So lots of interest there. You can see the field behind them, but it's blurred out in such a way that your focus is on these two figures. Very nice position on the field. Thank you. Next.
Behold the Light, Mesquite Dunes, Death Valley, 2012.
Oh, wow. This is almost a poster for Blade Runner 3038 or something like this. I really actually like how much grain you have in this image because it does have this kind of film quality. And, you know, I have said cinematic for a couple times in this evening already, but this also kind of really reflects that. It has a lot of this absolute, you know, stark majesty of the dunes, and with that one single figure, it has something really epic going on, right? This is someone on an adventure, on an exploration, this is like a self-discovery journey, you know, A24 Pictures movie. And it has a lot of power to it, but it has a lot of solitude as well. I find myself envious of this person standing on these dunes. Like, I want to be part of this adventure. You're making this look so phenomenal, right? And so unique. You feel like you're standing at the top of the world. And I really, really enjoy that. There's a lot of layering, beautiful shadow, very nice contrast and coloration. This is almost monochromatic, right? But yet it works. There's reds and yellows and everything is so warm and you feel the grain of the sand. So that's also partly why I like the grain in the image as well. So very Lawrence of Arabia. I really enjoy it. Thank you. Next.
Walked out.
This is definitely a picture that is trying to convey a very specific message or a very kind of intense thought here, right? The contrast between the church that proclaims that Jesus saves and a person who is clearly in distress, who is being prevented, locked out, not allowed entry into the salvation, essentially. So this is very literal at the same time as, you know, having several layers of interpretability and metaphor here. So this is very kind of, I wouldn't say it is straightforward. It does have a lot of layers to it. And depending on what every person's experience is, this will be a different interpretation, right? So you could interpret it in a cynical way of, you know, the hypocrisy of the church that proclaims salvation but restricts access to certain people, or people at all who are actually in distress. Or on the other hand, you can put it into context of, well, churches are in decline right now and simply they don't have the means to help anyone at all. This is not something that will help you out, whether just through financial means, because they are also defunct or something like defunded or something like this. So depending on who you are, you might actually interpret this differently. So that's interesting to put these elements in context. Thank you. Next.
Grasses.
This definitely has that feel of the ink stamps, the different layers, maybe a lithography as well, where you have a stamp of a different color that you then layer on top of one another to get a final print that is colorful. So this very much makes me feel of this. I think this has a lot of control on that. Loving the colors. I think it's very nicely done. I like the texturing, the kind of like horizontal lines of it. And the fact that the stalks of these kind of drooping yellow, I'd say they're more green than yellow, yellow grasses, I would say, are outlined. And so it does feel like something drawn. It has this kind of mournful feeling because everything is kind of downward facing and everything is kind of drooping. And there's this kind of swatch of black in the background that things are on top of. So it does have this kind of, you know, funeral almost look, but at the same time it is softened by that blue in the back that is actually very pleasant and very nice combination with the green of the plants. So it's a bit of both, right? It's a little bit bittersweet. I don't dislike the white framing around it, but I wonder if it's not fighting, if it's not too bright in contrast to the more soft cream tones of the actual image itself. I wonder if it shouldn't just be caught, the white frame. I'm mitigated about it. Thank you. Next.
Serengeti Sunset.
So I think I feel the wind on that image that's sweeping across from left to right? We have the wind that's kind of indicated by the motion of the hairs on the wildebeests. What is this? In French it's called gnu antelopes, but maybe it's called something else in English. But either way, on the animal, you can see that sweeping wind, and we have just that silhouette. In the background, we have this of the clouds. So it looks like this this animal is grazing at the top of the world, just above the cloud cover. And it's really, to me, it has this sense of almost exaltness, where you have walked for a very, very long time. You've reached the top of a mountain and you find that there is something alive there to greet you. So this animal over here on the top of the mountain is there as well. But at the same time, there's just so much breadth behind it. And there's only two elements here, right? There is the clouds and there is the animal. And there's a peaceful relationship between the two. The animal is just grazing. They're not caring about what's the absolute gorgeous beauty that's going on around them, behind them in those clouds. And so it gives this kind of like natural acceptance of beauty and of awe that I'm appreciating in this particular image. Thank you. Next.
We have two images, non-competitive, just for your critique. First one is COVID hair.
Oh, this is nice. So selective color here, where you've definitely invoking something, right? We have all throughout our experiences and through societal experiences forged some indelible connotations, let's say, for certain types of shapes and colors to be together, meaning signifying certain things, right? And so you're very much playing with that here, and I appreciate the comical thought here. So yeah, I like that. I appreciate what you're trying to do here, and I think I understand what you're trying to do here. Thank you. Next.
Photographic proof positive that the brown bear Ursus arctos does indeed poop in the tundra, Denali National Park, Alaska.
Well, indeed, yes, there it is, the proof. I can't argue with that. I'm not sure that I would actually comment on the pictorial quality of such a thing as a nature story. Could be interesting to document, though. Thank you. Next.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break and come back with. And I've got to correct something. Okay. Do you see Creative Basic?
Yes,
Yep.
we do.
Yes.
Okay. Creative Basic, 2 images. Second place, Elizabeth. And
I don't think she's here tonight.
okay, congratulations to Elizabeth. First place, Laura.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, I just, once again, I was playing around with lights, long exposure, using lights in a brush, a fiber optic brush and a lens ball. So thank you.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Very nice.
Creative Intermediate, 3 images. Third place, Ronnie.
Well, thank you. I'm hoping that this has happened to somebody else, but I submitted the wrong version of this.
Oh,
Hence the background that looks so inappropriate. But thank you for acknowledging my work. I worked a long time on this, trying different aspect ratios and having the tail extend, you know, having the flower in the center and having the tail go completely out from the other side. I've been trying this technique on Photoshop. I think it still needs a little bit of work, but thank you for recognizing this.
Congratulations. Second place. Greg.
Did he leave?
Is Greg still here?
Don't see him.
Congratulations to Greg. First place. Ellen.
Eat, Ellen.
Thank you. This is an iPhone photo using the slow shutter app, and it just came out fun.
Very cool.
Great.
Very nice, yeah.
Really like this.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Creative Advance, 2 images, second place. Trisha.
This is a mannequin I found in the Antique Society, and then a part of a vase that was at my sister's house. And I just thought it'd be fun to try and make her into a devil woman. That's what I did.
That's fun.
I think you did it.
Clever. Yeah.
Continue to surprise us, Trisha.
Congratulations. First place. Linda.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. That was, we have 2 computers on here, so one we have to turn off. This was at the Peggy Sue, the year before COVID. Yeah, at the fairgrounds here in Sonoma. But I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it looked like, you know, the Starship Enterprise's baby or something, you know. But thank you. A lot
Nice.
of fun.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Creative Masters, 4 images, honorable mention. Tim.
Well, this piece was done in the Boston Harbor, and with against the window of a new construction site. But thank you.
Congratulations. Third place. Me.
Oh, what did you do?
I first did a raster to vector conversion. Then going from, I gotta turn my volume down, I'm getting a feedback.
English.
English.
English, that's a good idea.
Sorry.
From the lower left to the upper right, after the raster to vector conversion, focused in on the color tonal areas and started something that generated almost like fish-like tiles. And it was animating, going one zone to another. And as it went, it started covering the original image. And I stopped it when the eye was still there. And then after I got to that point, I took what I saw and did a kaleidoscope over the different regions.
Love the
And that's
shape.
how I got it.
Wow, that's turned out nice. The
Yep.
maze.
A resident genius.
I
Amazing.
think the only person that understands is probably the judge.
Yeah, really. Seeing that under their microscope now.
Whatever, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's cool.
Second place. Anne.
Woo.
Oh, well, thank you. I am here. Sorry, I just got back from a trip and I'm all disheveled, but anyway, this was some graffiti that I altered on Photoshop, basically, adding kind of a texture to it that it didn't have before. And so, yeah, just playing with colors. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and
Neat, it's pretty.
Congratulations. First place. Terry.
These kids are in their second year of college now.
oh,
And this was when I was working at WA, and they were on the monkey bars. And after several years, they just got so used to me taking pictures of them, they just paid no attention. Sometimes they ham it up. So they were performing for me and I was taking pictures, and I enjoy the factuals from Flaming Pear, so I combined the two. Thank you for your feedback. You were right on the factuals and on so many things.
great, Terry.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
you did a nice job on that.
Monochrome Basic, 3 images. Third place. Dan. Is he here this evening?
I don't think so.
Congratulations to Dan. Second place. Fritz.
Not here either.
Not here.
Fritz is not here.
No, he's gone. He's elsewhere. He's watching the Giants game, actually.
I was wondering how many.
2-1.
Congratulations to Fritz. First place. Dan. Again. And not here.
Congratulations, Dan.
That's gentle. Nice.
Monochrome Intermediate. Third place. Sherry.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm really enamored with this image, and I did try different crops. I appreciate your feedback very much. The window was actually quite dirty, so it was a challenge to clean it up. But thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you.
Congratulations.
And first place. Ronnie.
Says second place.
Sorry, second place. Ronnie.
Thank you. Thank you. This is one of my favorite flowers to photograph. It's so elegant, so curvy, so graphic. And I thought it was perfect for black and white. So thank you.
Lovely.
Pretty.
Congratulations. And the real first place.
Thank you. Yeah, this was taken in Tonga when we were there, and I'm amazed at how much effort they put into this map making. And I just appreciate that people liked it. Thank you.
Well done. Beautiful.
Good story.
Yeah, very nice.
Congratulations. Monochrome Advance. 3 images. Bill, third place.
He's not here.
Not here.
Congratulations to Bill. Second place. Tara.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah, really
Thank
nice.
you. Very nice.
And Tara's not here, is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Congratulations to Tara. First place. Linda.
Woo!
Wow.
Wow, that's nice, Linda.
I had to unmute myself. Why, thank you. My goodness gracious. That was in Vegas, and I think you're right. It was, we were staying at Circus, and just when you just walking through, saw this, and this mannequin looked so cool. So just took a lot of shots and really appreciate your feedback on that. I'd like to try some different things with this. Well, thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's really neat.
Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Monochrome Masters, 3 images. Third place, Tamara.
Oh, I love
Oh, love that.
Love this.
She sends her regrets. She tried to get in late and it wouldn't let her in.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
She's on the road. She's on the road. So when she got to be able to, log in, she couldn't.
Congratulations to Tamara. Second place, Tony.
Nice, Tony.
wow, nice.
Yeah, very.
Bright light on it.
I think
Really
Tony's
nice.
sleeping.
It must have been quite a perch where he took this from.
Yeah.
I hope he wasn't hanging from it.
Yeah. Yay.
Congratulations to Tony. First place, Mike.
Whoa.
So good. Mike is in Maine, I think.
Yeah, the lighting on that's really neat.
Yeah.
Everybody should be in Maine.
Congratulations to Mike. Nature Basic, 3 images. Third place, Mark.
I know.
I love it. I love it.
Is he not here?
Is he still here? Is he?
I don't see him.
I don't see him. I think anyone who uses a macro lens to photograph a wasp deserves a lot of respect.
I'm still trying to work on figuring out how to get in that sharp.
I'm sorry? Congratulations to Mark. Second place, Elizabeth.
I love
Yeah,
this. This is
that's
so
so
great.
It's beautiful.
It's amazing how well it matches the leaf color.
Congratulations to Elizabeth. First place, Laura.
Woo.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah, it was my bucket list. One of my bucket list shots was to get an osprey with a fish. So I kept finding them where they come back and they didn't have a head on it. So when I got one that had a full front, fully intact, I was pretty excited.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
Lovely image.
Looks pretty sharp to me, Laura.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do
Real
better at a
good.
distance, but not on the macro.
Amazing.
Congratulations to Laura. Nature Intermediate, 4 images. Honorable mention, Pat.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we love going up in the High Sierra, and there's a place where there are a lot of these foxtail pines, and they're spectacular trees, truly.
Great view and angle.
Yeah, I love that angle.
Congratulations. Third place, Greg.
Okay.
Congratulations to Greg. Second place, Betsy.
Oh, love
They're so cute.
so sweet.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
The mom was on one side of these little cuties and the big dad was on the other side of these cuties, and I had a long lens. So that's as close as I wanted to get.
Oh, you should make cards from this.
Right.
Aw, thank you.
You can see their little teeth.
Oh, they're sweet.
Nose holes.
Congratulations. First place. Betsy also.
Woohoo.
Thanks
Great.
again. Thank you again. This little tiny thing that's such a bully caught my eye because it was in the morning and the sun was coming through these very vivid tail feathers. So I stepped outside and just took a lot of burst photos. And this is what I ended up with. Thank you.
Amazing.
Stunning.
Love the tail.
Congratulations. Nature Advanced, 2 images, second place. Herb.
Great image.
Nice.
There, okay, hi, thank you very much. This is an ancient image with EOS, what is it? A Canon 20D. And it's a small part of the image to begin with. And it is, at that time, I didn't even know what I was doing. So this is shot in JPEG. So yeah, it was just a sequence of this bird I shot in Alaska. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Like the
Great.
wings on it.
Great image. Love it.
Lovely.
Congratulations. First place. Jennifer.
Oh, thank you very much.
Really
I
good sequence.
Yeah.
just love these bears.
I love this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the medium bears.
Thanks for leaving out the poop.
Yeah.
I love the poop.
These two always stayed in their spot. And this guy, boy, nobody messed with him.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I
Great sequence.
appreciate it.
Wonderful.
Great job,
Oh, very
Jennifer.
good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nature Masters, 3 images, third place. Tamara.
Great.
Congratulations to Tamara.
Yay.
Second place. Tim.
Thank you very much. This was taken in the Monterey. I don't know whether or not I'm causing the feedback or not. This is in Monterey at the aquarium.
What a great trio.
Yeah, very nice.
It is.
Beautiful. Very
They have
elegant.
some of the best jellyfish displays, and I'd encourage everybody to go to the Monterey Aquarium because it's really first rate.
It is.
But thank you.
Congratulations. First place. Terry.
no way.
Good job, Terry.
Really?
You nailed it. There was glass in front, and I didn't actually even notice the blurs on it until I saw it up large. Yeah, I was surprised that I got anything. The glass was so dirty, but it was a lot of fun. Thank you. I'm glad you appreciated it. He was quite a good looking lizard.
Great color.
Great expression.
I know, right? Little smug.
Yeah. Nice, Terry.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Pictorial, basic, 2 images. Second place. Laura.
Oh, thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, actually it was pretty dark when I took that photo. So yeah, I had to do everything I could to bring up the color.
Congratulations. First place. Fritz. Did he
Yeah.
come back?
Oh, man.
Wow.
He's,
Well, that's
he's,
your
at,
nice.
he's, at our he's at the rebuild site at the ranch. So, yeah, this is a phenomenal image. I love this too.
That is neat.
Great.
And it was taken on a moonlit walk. But he'd have to explain the details.
How tall are those structures, those shapes?
About as I can't, I'll let him tell you the heights. They're big, so they're not small. They stand above your head. They're big.
Really great. Wow.
Otherworldly.
Great photograph.
Yeah.
Congratulations to Fritz. Pictorial Intermediate, 4 images. Honorable mention. Ellen.
Thank you. This was right here in California. And I titled it Joy because I think this was the first time we were dancing without masks. I was afraid they were going to come out with masks, COVID masks on, but they were just beaming. And they will be dancing tomorrow at the museum in Santa Rosa.
Very nice. Love the color.
Yeah, great color.
Love her expression.
Yeah, beautiful. Good title.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Third place. Ronnie.
Thank you. That is not jelly. It's mouth blown glass from Murano.
Wow.
I have a collection of them. I am struggling to figure out why there are areas that are not in focus because I focus stacked this. So I'm going to have to go back and look at it. But as you know, I love to do still lifes, and I had these amazing tomatoes, which are just so gorgeous. And I happened to put the basil right next to them, and I said, I need to do something with these. So that's how this happened. And I added the garlic. This was the second version, and I added the garlic, which I think makes it, in my opinion. So thank you.
It's a good counterbalance. It's great.
Yeah.
Gorgeous light.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Second place. Sherry.
Oh, thank you. I did add split toning and blue in the shadows because otherwise it was really a little bit too orangish pink. And I think calling that piece Alice in Wonderlandish is probably the coolest thing anyone's ever said about anything I create.
Where was that, Sherry?
That's in Golden Gate Park. It's an art installation in the sculpture garden at the DeYoung Museum.
Oh, very nice.
Beautiful.
Really cool image.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. First place. Sherry. Also.
Oh, thank you. You all know I really love portraiture, and I love the interaction and getting a response. And so I just feel really lucky with this shot. It just turned out beautiful. I did change the color of the shirt because it just was, yeah. But anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
Your portrait
expression.
Yeah. Your lighting was very nice on this.
Thank you. Yeah, that's grandson number 4.
Awfully cute.
Number 4.
Did you use an umbrella on that?
I have 2. Yeah, I have 2 umbrellas, and I had a light on the. I had a light behind him diffused but facing the backdrop.
Oh, very nice.
He's a character.
Done, Sherry.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
What had you said to him to cause him to have those wide eyes?
Oh gosh, you know what? I'm sure I can't remember. We spent all morning. Yeah.
Amazing, he sat that long.
Yeah. Are we
Yeah.
done
Oh, he
yet?
was into it. He was really into it. Yeah. I can't wait to do it again.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Pictorial Advance, 4 images, honorable mention. Linda.
Wow. I need to unmute there. Thank you. This is in Big Sky, Montana, and I did do a long, what did I do? 20 seconds. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for all the insights on this. I'm going to change it a little bit and see what it looks like. Yeah. Thank you.
Very cool.
Really pretty.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. 3rd place. Jennifer.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I really had fun with this tree, overlooking the Goat Rock and that part of the coast. So I really appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Did you say that was Jenner Headlands?
Yes, Jenner Headlands.
That's a new park, right? Because I think I've seen that tree and thought about shooting the other direction, but I like the angle you did.
Yeah, it is a new park, and it's really great height to where this tree is.
Yeah, I see you had Goat Rock in the background there as one of your features, huh? That's nice.
Thank you.
I'm currently working my way up the trail through Jenner Headlands. My goal is to make it all the way to the top of Pole Mountain.
Pole
Is
Mountain.
anyone else interested?
Steve, I've done it. And I can tell you, you've got to leave early and carry a lot of water.
Yeah.
It's my GPS said it was over 17 miles. I think their signage is like,
Yeah.
but it's longer than that.
That's
Yeah,
like
the trail
doing half
marker.
dome.
One of the trail markers I read said 8 miles one way, so.
Yeah, it's a little longer than the trail markers.
Yeah, 1,500 feet elevation change.
Actually, it's more like 3,300 because you have to you go up one mountain, then down almost to sea level again, and then back up again. Yeah.
Yeah, because what's Pole Mountain, about 18 or 17, something like that?
Yeah.
Pole Mountain is 2,200.
Oh, okay. It's higher than I
It's the
thought.
highest point in Sonoma County.
I did 5 miles there and almost died.
Yeah.
Congratulations. 2nd place. Gary.
Oh, well, thank you. That's nice. That was fun. We went down to the bay because they had these nice mid-level clouds, and so it might do something, but it was really socked in with fog. And then we drove up there to Goat Rock. And just as we got there, this gal was down taking pictures, so I had to get her into the picture. And then of course the sky, and then the Virga coming down gives you kind of soft clouds at the top. But I had a hard time with that horizon line, because if you really look at it close, that's the fog deck rising. It's kind of an optical thing. But when you actually look at the base of the fog line, I believe it's pretty darn level. So it's kind of a toss-up. Do you go with what's optically right at a glance, or do you do what's technically correct on that? So I chose technical.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Gorgeous.
Congratulations. 1st place. Herb.
I love this image.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much. This was from our trip to Bandon Beach a few weeks ago, and the lighting was nice. The tide was low, and I'm just running around like a nut trying to position everything so it looked like a pleasing composition. So appreciate your critique. Thank you.
Did your feet get wet?
Actually, they did, but after watching Nick Page YouTube channel, who does a lot of this stuff, I actually bought a pair of Northwest River Supply knee-high neoprene booties.
There you
And I
go.
had them on top of sandals. So this time I could walk through all the water without worrying about getting whatever I was wearing wet.
Pretty neat.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
That's pretty.
Pictorial Masters, 4 images. Honorable mention, Tamara.
Oh, love this.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Congratulations to Tamara. 3rd place, Nancy.
Oh,
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love digging deep into my stuff back to 2012 with some little camera, Micro Four Thirds, and playing with it with current tools. And this one was just such a joy to pull in.
Oh, really dramatic image.
Really beautiful.
mm-hmm.
There's actually something in the shadows that I hid. It's, some people would really like and some people wouldn't, but it's like we call an Easter egg when you find something. It's probably why I took the picture. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Now we're looking really hard.
Yeah. Is there a treasure map?
It's a treasure, all right.
I found it.
Oh,
It's a
good.
jewel, not a treasure.
You could call it Jules.
Yeah, it's a jewel.
Did you just find it, Ouliana, or did you see it before?
Just now when you told people to look.
It wasn't meant to be found until, but I'm sure that that's why I took the shot.
But we can't zoom in. Oh, well.
I want to zoom in really bad.
Yeah. It's not bear poop, is it?
It's what?
Not bear poop.
Nope. Congratulations. 2nd place, Tony.
Oh, so gorgeous.
Love the colors on that.
Love this. Perfect.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Congratulations to Tony. 1st place, Anne.
Woo.
Well, thank you very much. I sure appreciated all the comments about it. I agree that the border should be this, toned down quite a bit. So I will look at doing that, but thank you very much.
Beautiful.
Nice, Anne.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well done.
Congratulations. And best of show of the evening.
Da, 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 da.
Oh, yay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great pick.
That's a cool photo.
Very cool.
Mhm. Very
I'll have to
cool.
let him know. He actually made money on this picture. He submitted it to a big competition and it won. So
Ah,
yeah,
cool.
it is one of my favorites of his images. So I'll share that with him.
Yeah. Have you framed it yet?
Oh yeah.
Ouliana, many thanks for a wonderful
So
evening.
thank you very much.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Good
Learned a
job.
lot.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Ouliana.
Donna.
Thank you, Ouliana.
Thank you so much.